righty, good day, beautiful people. Welcome back to the Dr. Coach Show. I'm your host, Dr. Coach Danny Pueblos, and today I have my very good friend and mental performance coach, Dr. Rachel Hoft. How you doing today, Rachel?
I am good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and just excited to chat and talk with everyone.
I'm excited to talk to you. You know, you and I go back a long time, and it's been great to see everything that you've done in the field and everything you've done for yourself, both professionally and personally. You're a married woman now, and you're doing big things in the field. You know, so I'm definitely proud of you. You know, and everything you've done, and I wanted to share you with the world, and to share you with everyone else who's listening in, and about your and talking about your journey. You know, so again, thank you for coming on.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for having me. It's weird to think that it's been since 2017 when I met you for my master's program. So, like, here we are going on 8 years.
Yeah. 2017, really? Wow.
Uh-huh.
Time flies. But yeah, you're doing big things. You're a big girl now. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so super proud. And well, let's talk about that. I wanted to talk about you and your journey and um everyone I bring on here, brings their own unique journey and their own unique personalities and experiences. And I know you have your own unique journey. So can you talk about, your experience, because the one of the many reasons why I want to bring you on is because you have experience as a mental performance coach, as both on the sports side as well as the military. So I know you grew up being an athlete, and your experience with that. So talk to me, like, where did this all start? What motivated you to get into the field and all that good stuff?
Yeah. So I grew up playing soccer. So from like kindergarten into college, soccer was my thing. I was Rachel, the soccer player, not like Rachel who plays soccer. That was a really big identity thing for me. And I know
Mhm.
so many people can relate to that. And so I also ran track in high school, but I ran track in the off season to be faster for soccer. Like that was my purpose. It was something that motivated me and kept me locked in. And in the process of all of that, I had three ACL tears, a meniscus tear, lots of other minor injuries in between. So all that to say, I've got really unstable knees. But on top of that, I realized when I was an athlete and going through all my injury recovery, there was just a piece that was not clicking for me. I was told time and time again, like, okay, you're 100% healthy, get back into it. But mentally, I was afraid. I was scared of being re-injured. I didn't trust my body anymore. And I know a lot of people that have gone through big injuries like that, it's a real, like, shock to the system to be playing fearlessly and playing freely, and then all of a sudden being really nervous about getting back into that same environment. So once I stumbled upon sports psychology in undergrad at Cal State Long Beach, I recognized it was everything that I needed when I was playing sports, when I was going through my injury. Like, I just wished that I had access to all of that information and I didn't even know it existed. And so once I found that, I was locked in on it. And so I've used that throughout my master's program, my doctoral program, to really just propel me forward so that I can utilize and share this information. And so my doctoral research was on confidence changes during injury recovery and whether or not that gets the person back into their sport or whether they choose to retire. And so after all of that, I started working with athletes in team sports, in individual sports, and recognized that I also wanted to experience something a little bit different in a really like high performing environment. And so I dipped my toes into a tactical military environment, and I've been having the best time. I work with service members on sometimes like literal life or death situations, right? Like really going into a situation and having belief in yourself. Like that's top tier mental performance. So it's been really cool to have a wide array of experiences and working with athletes and something that they're passionate about, and then working with soldiers who are out there defending themselves and their country. And I get a little bit of everything. So it's been quite a journey and one that I'm really proud to look back on.
Yeah, that's awesome. And with your experience as an athlete, 'Cause I'm right there with you. I mean, as far as looking back when I was an athlete and playing and going through the pressures, going through the injuries, all that stuff, I'm like, I wish I had someone like me to talk to, and kind of like how you're alluding to earlier. Um, so how do you feel like and we'll get to the military side in a second here, but how do you feel that your experience as an athlete, especially having gone through all the serious injury and then having the whole identity thing, right, which is very, very common. How do you feel that kind of helped prepare you, for this, for you to be able to work with athletes and also the military?
Yeah, so I realized that when I was playing soccer, I did not know many people who had significant injuries. I knew they existed, but I was never close enough to somebody to know them. I had one high school teammate that tore an ACL, but I didn't talk to her that often. And so I didn't really know what she was going through. And then once I had my experience, I was just hit with like, oh, this is so brand new. It's new territory. I don't
Yeah.
know who to talk to. I don't know how to feel. And unless you've been through something significant like that, just straight up, you do not give good advice. If someone hasn't gone through that, a lot of times they're trying to say something encouraging or supportive, but on the other side of that, it's hard to accept and appreciate that. And so, what
Mm.
I have found as somebody who has gone through a significant injury, when I'm talking with an athlete, I've worked with many athletes who've had ACL tears or like tore their labrum in their shoulder, and we can talk about what that feels like. And it's sometimes the first experience someone has to actually say, oh, I feel really seen right now. I appreciate that you know what it's like, and I don't have to comfort you because you feel sad for me. I think that's a really big thing. And so
Sure.
when I can take that experience into the military environment as well, where a lot of times people feel they have to really hide their emotions and their concerns and their fears. Sometimes
Yeah.
I'm the very first person where they feel comfortable enough to open up and say, I'm having a hard time and I need to work through this. So I am honored to feel I'm honored to create an experience, an environment where people feel like they can be open and vulnerable.
Got it. Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that. It's tough, and that's where I know for me, whenever I've worked with athletes, I when I feel it necessary, I'll bring in my own experience, because um, with any population, I think whether it's athletes, military, or otherwise, if you're talking to someone who has been there, right, and has shared a similar experience, to you, um, it helps build that rapport, helps make them feel more at ease and more comfortable, right? And because a lot of times when we're working with our clients, I know for me at least, if I feel like they're coming in with like a wall of trying to see if they could trust you, right? Trying to see
Yeah.
who's this person, right? And and that's where I've always shared, yeah, I played sports all my whole life, and as soon as I stopped playing, got right into coaching, and and now I'm doing this, and I do that, to help to show them, like, yeah, it's if I have an experience, I've probably seen it as a coach, and at the same time, we all have our own unique experience, right? And I never minimize their experience. I don't want to say, oh, I know exactly how you feel, like, because we're different, even though we might have the same injury or the same experience. Um, we all go through it in our own way. Um, so I appreciate you sharing that. Now, um, you also talked about the identity part, right? Which is it's another common thing where um, anyone who goes through a transition of like career, such as in sports, right? But even you look at anyone who retires, right? Like they've been working in this industry for so long, and then it's like no, it's not there anymore, right? So, how was that experience for you as far as going from being an athlete to non-athlete? Because you mentioned that you're Rachel, the soccer player, right? And so how would you, right? And you could address how your experience, and share what you're comfortable with, but also, like, how would you, Dr. Hoff, talk to Rachel, the soccer player who was getting ready to transition?
Yeah. So it's a really good question. I will tell you, for me personally, because I didn't have someone to help guide me through that process, It sucked. I
Yeah.
hated it. It was really hard. I just my life orbited around sport,
Hmm.
and to not have that and not really be sure who I was outside of that was really hard. And so when I work with a lot of athletes on transitioning out of sport, we take a lot of time to really sort through who that person is outside of athletics and really get them to highlight all of the other cool things they get to experience, right? What
Hmm.
careers are you interested in? What hobbies make you happy? And which ones do you feel passionate about? Because up until then, that's a lot of times sport is really the only outlet. Sport is the only
Hmm.
thing they've paid attention to. And I see a lot of athletes really kind of blossom into new people because there are things that they hadn't um, considered before, or things that they just kind of put off to the side because I'm sure everybody knows, like, elite athletics takes up a lot of time. So
Hmm.
there are things where people kind of push that to the side in junior high, high school, college because, sport is their 9 to 5, so to speak.
Hmm.
So I would say looking into who else you are and what else you bring to the table in your day to day is a good place to start.
Absolutely, because so many of us wear different hats, and it's tough, right? It's tough when you grow up, and this is such a common story, especially in today's world, and today's athlete. Um, you grow up, playing sports, for example, and like, that's who you are. Like, oh, I'm an athlete, I'm a football player, I'm a basketball player, whatever. And um, it's like when it's gone, and it's like, what now? Even when I've done work with the NFL, I talk to a lot of these guys who play football their entire lives, and then you're like, what now? A lot of them, you know, some of them, very small, get into coaching. Some of it, well, actually, a smaller amount get into media, but the vast majority of them don't, you know. And a lot of them don't cope well with that, right? And sometimes they kind of resort to substances, right? And so it's tough, right? But again, it's tough for anyone, and that's where I agree. Being able to separate who you are from what you do is a big part of this, right? And
Yeah.
uh, whether you're a husband, a wife, a brother, a sister, a friend, a servant of people, right? Like, helper of people, like whatever that is, um, like that, it's like core stuff, right? Because what you do, I know for me, like, I'm a servant of people. Like, I serve people. That's what I'm here for. No matter what a hat I wear, whether it's mental performance coach, mentor, professor, coach, each one of those roles I play, I'm trying to help someone in a different context, and so like that, no matter what I do in my life, like that's who I feel like I am, and everyone has their own thing, and I'm glad you found your thing, and I know you're serving a lot of good, a lot of people right now.
Yeah. Well, so I think you bring up just a lot of good examples about, like who you are within your family or your friends, whatever your support network looks like. Because, to kind of bring this topic over to the military, I
Mhm.
work with a lot of soldiers who are career military people. They went straight from high school into the service, and they spend 17 to 20 years serving, and then
Mhm.
they have to find something completely new with their
Sure.
life. And for athletes, a lot of times people have to make that transition much earlier, right? You make it either like high school age or college age. And maybe if you make it to professional, then that's still relatively young. But a lot of times I work with people who are in their like 40s, 50s, 60s who have been in the service for so long that they've gone most of their life and have only seen themselves as this person,
Mhm.
their entire adult life. So making those changes really requires, I think, creativity and being able to explore other things that they have put off, and really getting to just be adventurous with themselves and like whatever and whoever is around them to try something new. And I think for a lot of people, trying something new in general is scary. And so
Mhm.
making a big life transition like that, I think the more time you give yourself to ease into it and to know what's coming, the easier it's going to be, right? That's kind of
Mhm.
for anything. So for someone who knows that a transition is coming up, I would say just start thinking about it and dip your
Mhm.
toes into something that you're interested in and, see what comes of it.
I love it. I love it. Now, speaking of transitioning, speaking of trying something new, let's talk about your transition. Going from, mostly working with athletes and all of a sudden you find yourself in this military realm. So how was that for you? How was that for you? And like, what are some things that you do, working with the military?
Yeah, so I will tell you, I was scared. I was so nervous because
Yeah.
I personally don't have a bunch of experience with tactical environments. I have a lot of extended family, cousins that have been in some branch or another,
Hmm.
but I have never really known what their day to day was like. And many of them were deployed and in combat situations, and it's not a fun thing to always talk about. So I didn't really know exactly what I was getting into or what the life of a soldier looked like. And so going into a completely new environment was a terrifying prospect for me, to say the least. But what I have found out about myself is that when I'm really scared about an opportunity or, just any opportunity, essentially,
Yeah.
um, that is the best thing for me to pursue because I can tell that I'm going to learn a lot about myself, that I'm going to face my fears. And at that point, I'm going to be a completely different person on the other side of it. And so I've learned to really listen to my brain in those moments. Like if I'm afraid of this, it sounds like the next challenge that I should be facing. And so working with the military has been a really great time because I have learned a lot about myself. I've learned more about a new tactical environment, and I get to support people in a completely different way than I would with an athletic population or with athletes specifically.
Mhm.
So it's been a really cool learning experience. I've done that for just over 2 years so far. And so it's been a decision that I'm really proud of myself for making.
Yeah, I know that's awesome, and I remember talking to you about that, and both of us are like, "Oh, this is new. This is new territory for you." And but I love the fact that you went past that. You went past that as far as the worry or concern about what could happen, right? Like on the other side of that hill, right? And it sounds like you're doing a great job, and because I know there's a lot of people. I've talked to a lot of people, whether it's my own mentees, whether it's people who ask me questions about the field. And I bring up the military, right? Because I hear a lot of like, well, I want to work in sports. I don't know about this whole military thing, right?
Yeah.
So I get a lot of that. Um, what is something that you would say to that, or say to people like that who are kind of want to work in the field of mental performance, especially if they're just fresh out of grad school or just they want to get their career started. What would you say to that? With people who are they see these opportunities of the military, even though they want to work in sports or entertainment or anything like that. How would what would you tell them?
Yeah. So soldiers are just athletes in a different environment, right? They're not competing for, trophies and such, but they are athletes. They have to be physically fit. They often are doing um, inter unit competitions. They are training for, there's something called expert soldier badge, and that's a mentally and physically demanding endeavor. And so, really, you're using your skills exactly the same way that you would with an athlete, but they're just facing something different. And so that is what I think is really helpful because personally, I feel like the military seems like a very scary concept for people who get into the field of sports psychology, thinking they're really only going to work in a traditional sporting environment.
Hmm.
And a lot of people are interested in it and people are like, what is that like? But it's kind of hard because, just with military operations, a lot of that stuff feels very, you know, discreet. So you gotta, there's a lot of stuff that kind of feels under wraps. And so people don't fully know what that experience is like. And so I've had a lot of people talk with me about, hey, I'm interested in this role in working with soldiers. And it's just, it's great. It's so much fun. It's
Yeah.
really cool environment to work with high performers. And it just, their competition environment, so to speak, looks different. It's not a field or a court, it's their day-to-day tasks and mission. And so it's something that I think has helped me to enhance my own skills as a provider because sometimes the stakes are much higher than going out for the championship game. So being able to help somebody through those types of situations, I think makes me more than capable of, helping somebody through, just a casual Saturday game kind of situation.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. And because it just there's so much uncertainty about that area, even though so many of us recognize the importance of what you're doing, what other providers are doing, and with helping the military. And so just bringing, like shedding some light on that is definitely important. Just to educate people, especially those who want to work in the field of mental performance, and
Yeah.
um, and seeing, hey, this might not be, the end of the road as far as like, what population. And it might be. I've talked to people who they're like, yeah, I'll give this military thing a shot, and then I'll go work in sports. All of a sudden, they're like, I love this military, I love this military stuff, and
Yeah.
I'm not, I don't want to go anywhere. So everyone's different. Everyone has their own experience, and yeah, I've met people who, who worked in the military, and then they're like, okay, then let's go to sports, or let's go, in other areas of performance. So, I appreciate you sharing that, your experience with that.
Yeah, for anyone who's interested in this type of role and working with the military and seeing what it looks like. So I work specifically with the Army. Each branch is going to have different resources and programs for their service members. So
Mhm.
the program that I am currently a part of is called Holistic Health and Fitness, or H2F. And they are opening a ton of new teams across many installations across the US. And that specific role is called cognitive performance specialist. So for people who are interested in that, I would really recommend checking it out because I have seen so many soldiers just kind of really open up and take advantage of these opportunities. And it is one of the most fulfilling things that I have ever done. And again, where I feel like I've really enhanced my own skills in just being a practitioner. But on top of that, a lot of people that I'm connected with who are working with any sort of professional team, a lot of them all recommended experience with the military first to get a wide range of experiences to then work in professional sports. And so it does kind of help because sometimes, working with professional teams, those opportunities are pretty limited. And so being able to dip your toes in something completely different, I think really helps prepare for those other opportunities.
Absolutely. Could have said it better myself. Now, you did mention buy-in. Okay. I am curious. How have you experienced the buy-in from military personnel that you've worked with? Because I know just across, whether I don't care what industry, sports, military, entertainment, um, there still lives a sort of stigma about what we do, right? It's kind of better, but um, when you look at military, right? Because you think this is a very machismo kind of culture, just like I was talking to a previous guest about with football, right? When I went to present to a bunch of football coaches, and we're too many older coaches there. A lot of them were on the younger side, so there's still that like weirdness about what we do, and how we can help. So, how has it been with you? How has your experience been with that as far as the soldiers that you work with? Have they been like open, some not so much?
That's a good question. So I would say it's a mixed bag, to be
Okay.
completely honest. So I would say it's like 70-30 in favor of people who are open to this type of thing and who are excited about it. I have a lot of people who know the importance of working on the mind and want to take advantage of these resources. And then I would say there's sometimes like 30-ish% of people who are really hesitant and still view any sort of mindset work as, you're broken. And
Hmm.
I work really hard to clarify for all of the people that I meet with and show them the benefits of it, right? So you said something to us in our master's program 8 years ago about, and I've held on to this, and I think it's important that
Right.
remember this. You said everybody is practicing physically, but not everyone is practicing mentally. And I have held on to that, and I share that with everybody, right? If these soldiers are going out for a really difficult competition, like, hey, you are competing against these other people. You are all practicing physically, and it's gonna suck at times, right? Like if you're going for special forces or SEALs or Rangers, right? All of those things, it's not really a secret. It's gonna be hard. So
Yeah.
tapping into your mind to be able to work and push through the suck is paramount
Hmm.
for being able to get through that. The people who make it to the other side will always tell you I was able to tap into my internal resources to be
Yeah.
able to get through that. And so I work really hard to make sure that people understand, hey, you know, going from here or like going from here to here, I forgot this is a podcast. Let me describe visually, right? So if we're on the lower end of a spectrum, making a big jump, right? Sometimes you don't need a ton of mental work to make a huge improvement, but sometimes when
Mm.
you're already at the top, it takes a lot more effort mentally and physically to just increase a little bit, right? And so it doesn't mean that you're broken. It means that you have currently utilized all of the resources. If you're trying to get to that next level and having a hard time, check within inside yourself. Where can you push a little bit harder? Because physically, your body is only going to be able to take on so much. And
Yeah.
so I think what's really helpful is I have a lot of leaders within the Army who are very bought in on this and they recognize the benefits of that. And when I have their support and we can create a little bit of forced fun, as we call it, then it's easier for people to see, okay, this is something that is beneficial and I don't have to feel weird um, about taking advantage of these resources and just
Yeah.
bettering myself.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you remember that because it's such an important thing. After all, the other good memory after all these years, but it's so true. It's so true, and I literally told someone this yesterday, and I could see, the comparisons between a military personnel and an elite athlete, right? Because when you look at an elite athlete, especially at the higher levels, right? D1, college, pro, Olympic, right? Um, Physically, everyone is like right here, like we're just hand in hand, like head to head. Very little separates them, right? And it's that the mentality that I feel makes a difference. And even my limited exposure with military, especially when they're being pushed, and whether it's like just basic training for the army or any other service or going for a ranger, or anything like that. Um, I can imagine it being these people who are here especially for like special forces kind of thing. I would imagine them being, physically at their peak performance, right, their peak level. What's the difference? What's the difference between those who make it through that and those who don't, right? And
Yeah.
to me, it's a mental game. It's a mentality that gets them through that because, yeah, you could do 1,000 push-ups. That's great, right? I'm sure a lot of these military personnel are just physically they're so fit, right? Um, but when you're pushed to the brink, and your body's like wanting to give up, just like an athlete's body wants to give up right in the middle of a game or competition. It's that's where the mental game lives, right? That's where the mental game lives, because when things are going well, it's easy, right? When things are going well, it's easy, and but the mental game lives where when it gets hard, right? When things get hard and your body is like, well, you want it to give up, and especially in higher stakes situations like the military, right? You can't imagine that. So yeah, it's a great point.
Yeah. And I would add for anyone who is a decision maker or influencer and wants to help people in their organization kind of buy in a little bit more. Um, I work with a lieutenant colonel, so this is like a career military person. He has been in for, probably like 20-ish plus years. He's in charge of an entire battalion. And so, for those who are not familiar with the military setup, like I was not when I first started, there's a brigade, and that is like the entire kind of like role of all the people within that. So there's, a brigade of military police, a brigade of engineers or infantry or whatever else. There's a brigade commander, that's usually a colonel, and then underneath that are battalions. And so that is someone who, lieutenant colonels typically will oversee that. And they've got, sometimes hundreds or thousands of people that they oversee. And his approach is being super open with everything that he is doing to work on himself and his mindset. So he will put in the calendar all of his health appointments. If he's going to his like primary care physician, he puts that in there. If he's coming to see me for mental performance, he puts that in there. And it's something that everybody can see so that they know, okay, if my commander is doing this and taking the time, that also allows me the opportunity to say, hey, I want to follow in those footsteps because it doesn't have to be embarrassing or shameful. The person in charge is going to do that. I should be able to do it as well. And so, really, like setting that example, talking about it, explaining the benefits, that it goes a long way because he went and started doing that and improved his battalion's readiness for combat by, I believe he said, 17%. That's huge. That's huge.
Wow. I mean, to me, that's the definition of a leader, right? Because I know sometimes you get people who, they're good at yelling, they're good at t telling people what to do, right? They're good at talking the talk. Now in New York now, but they don't do a lot of that walking, right? So, I love to hear that. I love to hear it, because I mean, just even when I was talking to those football coaches who spoke to me after my talk, a couple of them said, "Hey, yeah, I'm actually gonna." One of them said, "I've been doing this past year, like incorporating mental performance stuff, and it's been great, and they even won the championship." So I'm like, "Yeah, that probably played a big role in that. So good job, coach." But he's like, actually, I took it from my own therapy. He's like, I've been seeing a therapist, and I took a lot of these things, and I'm also reading up on sports psych stuff, mental performance stuff, and he's like, I incorporate it into my own life, right? And so another example of a head coach or a leader, doing what he's asking of the people that that they lead, right? That they lead. So it's always a breath of fresh air when I see that in any context, whether it's in sports, the military, the business world, right? I mean, I don't know how many times I've had a boss who, they're good at again telling you what to do, right? While
Yeah.
while they're in their office, playing on their phone or just hanging out, right? And
Mhm.
and that's why I appreciate like the different jobs that I've had going through college. Um, the ones who the managers, the supervisors stuck out were the ones who were with us, right? The ones who, when there was a customer, who complaining, they didn't go hide in the back, right? They're like right there with us, supporting us or whatever we needed, right? Or even my first job, I was a tire installer, right? Like the store manager, one of them, the first one, not so great. Next one came in. When we got busy, he would change his clothes into the mechanic clothes, and he would be out there working with us. It's like that's the definition of a leader. And so I
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing that. And yeah, I mean that needs to be hopefully a lot more leaders hear that and kind of take that and say, yeah, what can I do to because that motivates the people that they lead, right? Say, hey, they're doing this, maybe I should do this too.
Yeah, I agree. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of his and really anyone that walks the walk.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I know one thing that people have questions about is kind of what does a day-to-day look like for like a content performance specialist in the military, right? And so can you, as much as possible, I'm not sure how much you can share, but as much as possible, can you kind of give an example or examples of like, what you do, with the soldiers?
Yeah. So what I really love about my role is no day looks the same as any others. I really have a lot of freedom to create and problem solve, which is like one of my favorite things to do. I love a project. And so I work with a lot of people one-on-one on, whatever personal goals they have. So if they're going to a school, if they're going to an academy, if they are working on getting promoted or earning a badge, we will work specifically on those skills. But I also work with groups. Sometimes, they work in teams, squads, platoons, battalions, companies, whatever, like lots of different sizes that a mission can require. And
Mhm.
so sometimes I will do team building. Sometimes I do general mental skills training, whatever they are looking for and whatever is going to support their mission, I can create something to support that. And on top of that, I often will support them when they are doing their fitness test. I will support them when they are going out to the range and getting in their head and they keep missing their shots. So
Yeah.
it's really cool to be able to really be with them in those moments because, it's cool to be in an office and be able to talk with people one on one, but I really like being able to be in their environment and see what they are going through. And in that type of environment, being with them buys a lot more trust and rapport, right? I live in Seattle in the Pacific Northwest. It is cold and wet up here. And a lot of times I'm out there in the rain and the cold with them. And it's something that I have seen people trust me more because I'm there with them. And so it can really look like anything you want it to be and whatever your unit is needing. And I like that it gets to be fun and new and adventurous each time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, with your unique experience having worked with athletes and also with the military, what are some common like challenges that you've seen in both, right? Especially now, working with the military, and your experience as both an athlete and now as a mental performance coach. Because you did mention right now, being in their heads, right? Like that's one of them, right? So can you talk to me about, some kind of very similar, common challenges that they face mentally?
Yeah. The number one common issue I see between athletes and soldiers is thinking that negative self-talk is going to make them better.
Mm,
Like, number one thing. And when I speak with career military service members, all of them talk about like new army versus old army. Old
mm,
army being very much like rub some dirt on it and get back out there type of
yeah.
approach. And so a lot of people have adopted that type of talk from others and use it against themselves, thinking that it's going to motivate them. When in reality, they're just bringing themselves down, making themselves feel incompetent or incapable. And it's so common with athletes as well. I have a lot of athletes whose parents, all they do is point out their mistakes.
Hmm.
All their coaches do is bench them for missing a shot. And so people will really like ingrain everything they hear from others and use that as their own self-talk and like the voice that they use for themselves. And it does not work. Doesn't work. It just, people feel awful and they don't realize it. And as soon as you ask somebody, hey, I understand why you think this would be helpful, but how come you're not saying that exact same thing to your best friend over there when they've made a mistake? Oh,
Hmm.
well, because I know that it's going to make them feel bad. Okay, why is that not the same for you?
Yeah.
Right. And so once I can help somebody to understand, hey, showing yourself what you are capable of, showing yourself what you can and have done, once we can identify that, they really start to become a different person. They're more open to learning. They are able to leave mistakes in the past and they succeed at a much higher rate because mistakes don't hold them back anymore. That's, I think, the biggest issue, right? Like people are afraid of making mistakes.
Mhm.
And so that's all they're thinking about. And so they make those mistakes,
Yeah.
right?
It's like the whole pink elephant
Cycle.
thing, right? It's like don't
Yeah.
think about a pink elephant, right? Like very common, use of that. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's very true. Very true.
Yeah. So I I would say like 80% of the time, whether it's soldiers or athletes, we end up starting on managing negative self-talk
Mhm.
because all they do is bring themselves down. And then once they open up their mind to what the possibilities are, they're so much more open to everything else. And that, yeah, I'd say that's the big one.
Nice. Thanks for sharing that. Now, what about like situations where they've gotten in their head? So can you like what does that look like? I think because I've worked with a lot of athletes. I know you have too. Whether it's doing a penalty kick in soccer or shooting a free throw or kicking a field goal in football. It just these moments. It can happen anymore. I'm just giving you a few examples of where athletes can get in their head and literally just throw away the game. So what does that look like in the military realm?
Yeah. So depending on the person's role, it can look pretty different. But I would say the most common ones I see are when they're doing their fitness test.
Mm,
So the Army Combat Fitness Test, or ACFT, it's like 5 or 6 different exercises, and they're pretty intense. And after doing all of these exercises, it ends with a 2-mile run.
mm,
And so they've already like fully gassed themselves out, like cardio based and strength resistance based, and then
yeah.
to go crush 2 miles. And
Ugh.
a lot of times, running is their biggest fear in the first place. So maybe they didn't get the score that they wanted on their push-ups, or maybe they didn't hold their plank as long as they wanted to. So then they're like, well, if you can't do that, you're definitely not going to be able to do this 2-mile run. You're definitely not going to be as fast as these other people. And it's like, okay, this is an individually scored activity. It doesn't matter how fast everybody else is running, right? Your job is to pass. Can we just focus on what you are going to do in this moment? And so a lot of times people are thinking multiple events ahead rather than just, hey, can I lock in my form for my deadlift? Can I lock in my form for my plank so that I can make it past that minimum mark? And I would say that is like a really common situation where people take themselves out of the game before they've even like stepped up to the starting line.
Yeah. And do you see like perfectionism popping its head anytime, in
Oh
that
yeah.
time frame?
Oh yeah, there are, well, because when we talk about like negative self-talk, a lot of people where I see high levels of perfectionism,
Yeah.
uh, high levels of negative self-talk because nothing seems to be good enough, right? There is anything less than perfection is failure,
Mhm.
and that can be really frustrating. The Army does have high standards for
Yeah.
certain parts of their life, and if they are not meeting one or multiple of them, they view themselves as a failure. And I work really hard with people to acknowledge that, hey, like you're setting really high standards for yourself, and that's great. And it helps with motivation and, achieving more. But if you are psyching yourself out and saying that nothing is ever good enough, there's never going to be a point where you feel good about yourself, right? We have to really address that so that people can actually take pride in what they do and open more doors on where they can be successful.
Got it. Yeah, because as you were talking about that, I was like, yeah, I could totally see the pressures of being in the military. Um, and that bringing in the whole perfectionistic expectation, right, of these personnel, how that could just breed more, performance anxiety, more of the negative self-talk, and especially if things aren't going their way, right, whether it's, with the drill or competition or otherwise, just like an athlete, right, just like an athlete, it starts to snowball from there, right, and all of a sudden now they're going back to getting in their heads, right, it's all like intertwined.
Yeah. It can be hard. And, they're people sign a contract when they get into the army or any branch. And
Yeah.
so that can be a really big fear for a lot of people because it's literally their life. It is their income. It is everything. And, if they are not excelling at the level that they think they should be, then, it feels like all the dominoes are falling down. If this one piece is out of place, then everything else is going to be affected by it. And so it's really important to help somebody identify, hey, just because this one piece is off doesn't mean your entire foundation is in shambles. And I think that's where a lot of people start to see big changes in their life and they feel a lot more control over their life when that perspective switches.
Got it. Well, Rachel, I appreciate your perspective. Speaking of that, okay. Thank you so much for coming on today. You brought a lot of great insight, to everyone who's listening and watching. So thank you for taking the time to do that and for sharing all your great insight to both the sports and military world.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me, Dr. Coach. It was good to chat with you and I had a great time here.
Absolutely. Thank you again. So yeah, thank you to my guest, Dr. Rachel Hoeft, and thank you for listening in. Okay, so please like, subscribe, excuse me, like, subscribe, and share. Excuse me.
There
Now
we
we're
go.
better, right? And we'll see you guys on the next one. So take care of yourselves and each other. We'll see you.
Bye.